Welcome to One Foot in Both Worlds, keeping it real with Tania and Nette. Hey Tania, how are you?
I'm well, Nettie. How are you? I've missed you so much.
Yeah, very good. I've just got back from Vietnam, so I've had 2 weeks holiday, so we've had a bit of a break. And we played our new piece series, Why I Was Overseas. So I sort of got back to that all settling in. And yeah, I missed you too. It's weird when we're not together. In fact, we were
It
meant to
is.
podcast yesterday. It was the first time we could get back, and Tanya's power went out. And I'd got home and I was vacuuming and stuff like that. And you wouldn't believe it. I go to put my vacuum back on and it won't work. No power. So I'm like, that's a bit weird. Maybe this PowerPoint's not working. And I put in another PowerPoint wouldn't work. Husband came home. He's trying to make it work. And then he goes, "You weren't talking to Tanya today, were you?" I said, "No, I was meant to." But then I didn't. And he goes, "You two have
You
broken the
too.
vacuum." And he said, "Just walk away from it, leave it." And anyway, an hour later, he tried to make it work again. It wouldn't. He said, "Oh, in the morning, he's pretty handy. He'll connect something up and make it work." And
Yeah.
this morning I woke up, just plugged it in and it worked. So we did break my vacuum yesterday. So I'm very glad that we could meet today because I don't really want to ruin any electrical items. But obviously my energy was
Yeah,
getting so full ready for it. So
I
tell
know.
me what's happened while I'm gone? What's happened in the world of Tanya?
Oh my gosh. So, in the sort of introduction podcast where we were talking about what was coming up, I was still really sort of going through this process of spirit teaching me about the pineal and sitting in it and trying to understand it. See, I've got stuff to say. I'm coughing. And as you know, I'm the experiencer, so there's all these, different things that always happen. But are you ready for my story? Because I
Yes.
I I messaged Nettie and I'm like, Nettie, I have this really crazy story that Spirit sort of used as a teaching experience for me, which was lovely. So probably about 3 weeks ago, my friends and we went out to a pub and they have a live band and whatever. So her and we kind of sit at the end of this table. And you know how you kind of like to have like group tables,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
super long tables. So we're kind of sitting with these other people. So she's wandering off. She's wandered off. She's chatting with some people. I wasn't too sure where she was. I kind of thought she was over in the corner. And I'm sitting at this table and there's a guy sitting in front of me. These are older men. They're probably like in their 50s, 60s, like 60s, like they're not younger. So there's a guy sitting across from me, and then there's a guy standing right beside me. Hashtag women in men's fields. That's your spoiler.
Okay.
So I lean forward to either try to hear what this guy was saying or to listen to what this guy was saying. I'm not 100%. I lean forward, and this fucking dude beside me shoves his tongue in my ear,
Oh.
licks all
Oh. Oh my
licks
God.
all in my ear, and
Oh.
I don't even know him. Like,
Oh my
and
gosh.
this was not like, you're flirting with someone and
Ugh.
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm way too
So
visual for this. I
mhm.
can feel it in my ear.
So this isn't like a misunderstanding where you're flirting with someone and they get a little bit too handsy and you're
Yeah,
like, whoa, like back off. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. This was not that. This was
yeah.
some random stranger shoving his tongue in my ear. So I step back and I am literally scraping the saliva
Oh,
out of my ear. And I look at him. Sorry, it's making me cough. This is an energy thing, this cough.
yeah.
So I step back and I'm cleaning the spit out of my ear, and I'm like, what the F, dude? Like, what the are you actually doing? Like, what's that? And his buddy that's sitting across from him, he's like, oh, whoa, yeah, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And I look at him, I'm like, are you on glue? Like, do you have daughters? He's like, yeah. I'm like, do you think that your daughter should be able to go to a pub and have some guy shove his fucking tongue in her ear?
Go you.
So I'm like yipping at them, right? And the dude's just standing there, like he's not going, oh, I'm sorry, nothing. So I look at this girl across from us. I'm like, can you watch my drink? So she watched my drink, and I go find my friend. And she's sitting down at the table with this guy and this girl in there. I'm sorry, my throat. It's the energy of
Yeah.
it. So she's sitting down at the table with this guy and this girl. And I go over there and I'm talking to the guy because my friend and this other girl are gabbing. And I told him what happened. He's like, oh my God, that's what? And he's like, do you know? I'm like, no. He's like, well, your ears are kind of cute, you know.
Oh,
We're joking around. He's joking. He's joking.
yes.
He's like, this is horrifying, but your ears? Like, what's so
Yeah.
special about your ears, you know? So he goes, go get your stuff, come back, you can sit with us. So I'm like, okay. So I go back to the table and I start gathering up my stuff. And I don't know if they said something to me or what, but I look over and his buddy, the one sitting, not the one standing, he goes, man, you really need to apologize to this woman. Like, you need to apologize to her. So buddy turns to me, looks me in the eye. You can see the rage coming up in him, tense shoulders, tight fists. And he looks at me, he goes, you're the fucking woman. You're supposed to just take it.
Oh, no. Ugh.
And he's like aggressively like up in my face. Well, police Tanya jumps in and I grabbed this guy and I threw him to the ground.
Oh, no way. He picked the wrong chick.
Did he ever? I threw him to the ground and I get on top of him and I start putting him to an arm bar. And then the bouncers pull me off of him. I'm a grown ass adult. I told you you'd love this story. But he was like, all like, I was scared. I'm like, this guy's going to punch me in the face, especially with that kind of like ideology in
Yeah,
his
yeah,
head
yeah.
that, like, sorry,
And
my
the
throat.
fact that he'd done such a random act just to lick in your ear, it was
It
like,
like a random sex assault. Let's just call it what it is.
yeah, like where is he at? Where is his headspace at?
Exactly.
That could have got really ugly, you know? Like if
Yeah.
it was someone else who didn't have your abilities on so many levels,
Yeah.
then that could have been a really different story.
Really
And
dangerous situation, right?
yeah, I mean, you put him in his
So
place, really.
sure
You were
did.
like, yeah, I'll show you what a
Sure.
woman can really do. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
not going to sit and take this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're supposed to just take it. What?
Yeah.
Like,
Did
I
you say
just,
that to him on the ground?
no,
You're
no, I
supposed to
was
just
pulled
take
off way
this.
too fast. So the bouncer comes up to me, and this isn't like a bar. This is like a pub that
Yeah.
has live music, but of course they have the doorman and whatever. So he comes up to me, he's like, what happened? And so I told him, and he's like, oh my God. He's like, well, this guy's been kicked out, no problem. This moves into sort of the emotions and the pineal and all of this that Spirit had kind of been, teaching me. And, I get so irritated with being sort of the experiencer, but apparently that's the best way for me to learn. So,
Not only
uh,
the best way to you to learn, it's the best way for our listeners to learn. Like it's a
yeah,
relatable story is great. So unfortunately for
yeah,
you, you
yeah,
that's one of your roles.
yeah. And just so you know, this is what every woman should do. Like, no man should be allowed to touch us in any flippin' way, nor should that ever be on any level. Not that women typically put up with it. That's not what I'm saying. It was just so unacceptable. So, anyways, he's like, holy cow, what just happened? And he goes, he's laughing. He's like, that dude was like just ready for me. He was on the ground and just ready to go. And it's a good thing because he probably had about another 10 to 15 seconds before he realized, kind of processed what actually happened, that he really messed with the wrong person.
Yeah.
So he gets thrown out, and then the bouncer's like, you know what, you're actually gonna have to leave too.
Yeah.
And I was like, totally get it. This is what happened. My apologies, but like, da da da. He's like, yeah, that's not cool, but like, we can't, kind of
Yeah.
have that here. So then my friend, so I said to him, I said, well, I need to leave. Can you go get my friends? So he goes over and he grabs my friends, and then the two other people end up coming out with us. Well, one of is like this huge, like 6'3", probably 300 pound, like black guy. He's huge. So we go outside and he's like, oh my God, like, are you okay? And I'm like, can you cuddle me? So I like kind of laid on his chest and he puts his arm around me. I'm like, that was terrible. He's like, that was awesome. Like, that is, he's like, that is the best thing ever. And I'm like, that is not the best thing ever. Like, it was so violating and it was so like I shouldn't have reacted, but of course should have reacted, but
Yeah. You were put
but
in a
it was
position that you didn't want to have to do, but at the same
100.
time, you know, like I don't agree with violence, but at the same time, that person, what you did was a nice putting in the place of that person, like, of saying,
Yes.
hey, no, mate, like this isn't on.
Yeah.
And,
This,
yeah,
no. Yeah.
yeah,
Don't get up
definitely.
all aggressive in my face,
Yeah.
when someone tells you to apologize for shoving your tongue in my ear, right? So this is basically how it rolled out. And of course, you're hearing the empowered version, but for like a week, I was just in this like, oh, like I was kind of trying to process the emotions of it, but I kept kind of feeling stuck.
Yeah.
And I was like, because it was violating, but it was also, um, I wish I didn't have to do that, but I did that. And then I'm questioning myself and I'm going through this whole process of like, um, intellectualizing the whole thing. And I was really struggling to kind of get into the place where I'm just like having this experience sort of process and flow through my body, right? Then the next weekend rolls around, and the guy, his name's Anthony, he went back to the pub, and the guy was allowed back into the pub. The guy was there.
So the 6'3" guy went back to the
Yeah,
pub. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
With his friend, that the girl that was chatting with my friend. So he's like, yeah, that guy was there and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with this dude still being in the pub. So him and I talked that morning and he told me, and I was like, oh, like this just isn't sitting with me right with me. Like, I'm not okay with this. So I talked to another friend of mine. She's like, Tanya, go down there and tell them your side of the story. Because apparently what they told Anthony is that they watched the video and they were like, well, I don't see any reason for this level of aggression based on the video.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so he's back into the pub. So I'm like, like I am not okay with that kind of
Yeah.
predator
Yeah.
being out and about, because if he's going to do that to me, he's done it to other people. And the women, like this needs to be like a safe establishment for women. I am not okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So of course I'm still just to go back to sort of the emotional process. It was, I didn't feel empowered in any of it. I felt icky. I felt anxious. I just like, it was gross. It was very, and I'll explain sort of how spirit showed it to me a little bit later. I just was like really in my head about it and feeling really bleh. So anyway, so I go into the pub and I talk to this manager, and I said, I just want you to tell you what happened. And I told her the story. And then she goes, she goes, I just want to make sure we're talking about the same guy. She's like, is he like, describes him? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, because he came in on Thursday and he showed us this bite mark on his arm. Like there was actually teeth and his whole arm was bruised. And he said that you were chirping at him and then you bit him and threw him on the ground.
Oh, I'm so glad you went back,
Me
right?
too. So, because when I arrived, I'm like, I'm a little disappointed in how this has been handled, but I also recognize that haven't heard my side of the story. So she's like, okay, thank you so much. I said, you need to go back in the tape because
Yeah,
you need
go
to go
further.
back,
Yeah.
go further because there's a decent time delay between,
Yeah.
him getting all aggressive in my face and me, defending myself and him
Yeah.
shoving his tongue in my ear. So, so I said, yeah, whatever. She's like, I believe you. She was really wonderful. She was very awesome in the sense that she was like, I believe you. And I'm like, girl, I didn't have to bite this dude to get my point across. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, but also concerning who bit him,
Yeah, I
right?
know. What else happened? Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so I got a call a couple days later after, sort of sharing my story and blah, blah, blah. And one thing that she said when I was talking to her, she goes, you really dropped that guy.
Yeah. He messed with the wrong girl.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm like, yeah, I did totally. Anyway, so I went and I said my piece, and I needed to be heard because I'm not okay with that guy being predatory and being in pubs with women in the like, I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
So a couple of days later, she called and she said, yeah, I had a meeting with the owners and I had a meeting with the manager, and we re-reviewed the video, went further back. She's like, we're really sorry that this happened in our establishment. He's been banned. And, we're sorry that we didn't have the full story sort of in the first instance. And part of it that kind of bothered me too, because I said to her, I go, I just have a quick question. She was a very lovely lady. This is nothing against her in any way, shape, or form. I said, I just want to know, why did I have to tell you guys twice?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I get you don't know me from a hole in the ground. I get all of those things, but why does a woman have to tell somebody something like this twice
Yeah.
to
Why
be
weren't you
heard?
believed in the first time? Why didn't they go
Right?
back and have a good look at that? Yeah,
So
that
I'm
night.
pretty sure that the bouncer would have sort of shared that story, but I can understand when you go back and you look at the video and you're like, but I'm not seeing that on the video, not realizing that it's, 10 minutes prior. So anyways, so that was kind of resolved. They said, yeah, he won't be coming back into the pub. She's like, I'm very sorry. But it was kind of this moment of, like I said, why did I have to say that twice?
Yeah.
But they handled it wonderful, and I'm very happy with sort of the outcome. So after that, I go for a walk to the park, and I'm still, I'm feeling better. Energy's moving a bit better through me. You know that feeling when you're kind of stuck in something kind of emotional?
Oh, absolutely.
Energy's flowing better, and I'm like, I really needed to speak up and I really needed to be heard. And when I go for a walk after the pub, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm gonna die on this hill. This is a hill I'm willing to die on.
Yeah.
you know like, if I am not taken seriously, I'm not quite sure what my next step is going to be. Like, I
Yeah.
am willing to die on this hill. So I go for a walk, and spirit comes in, and here's what they said to me. They said this to me in one of our previous podcasts. I can't remember. It was either the nervous system or it was the past lives, and maybe you'll have a better memory of this, but they said that when I get triggered, it messes up my nervous system, and then I get out of my intuition and I go straight into logic,
Yeah.
and I start not picking up on like intuitive hits and stuff like that. Do you remember us talking about that?
Yeah, and that's exactly what
Yeah.
happens. Like we fall into our conscious, and so all our emotions get
Yes.
so strong, and
Yes.
we kind of get,
Get stuck there.
well, yeah, and our rational thought, which sits back more there, is gone. It's like, you just can't get past the fact that you feel like this, or you're so angry about this,
Yes.
or and
And
it's
so this is what they were explaining to me, that because it was like a triggering, like upsetting thing, it slammed me straight into my conscious, like right at the front. And the best way, I just have to go to the side. This is my conscious, this is my pineal, and this is my subconscious. It's almost a gas tank,
yeah,
that has sort of a gauge. But so that is why when it slams me straight into the conscious, because my nervous system is dysregulated, that it slams right into here. And then I'm not, the energy of the situation, the emotions, because emotions are energy, are not flowing through my body in like a good processing way. So I'm sitting in my head trying to like logically intellectualize and process my emotions. And the part that I found so interesting is that the amount, I mean, being a police officer, like the amount of traumatizing situations or things that have happened, I can go click, yep, 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 sort of through time. And there's what they're saying right now is that it's very normal, that is what happens
yeah,
when the nervous system starts to dysregulate. So then you go into the front and the nervous system can't settle.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So then, as soon as I was able, obviously, I was communicating with spirit. So I was in my pineal. It all processed really well for me. And then I was okay. But it took me quite some time, probably a week, week and a half, almost, yeah, a week and a half. No, it was about a week before I made the click that I was not here, sort of in my pineal, where everything flowed and moved through my body so much better. It was fascinating, the emotional process that came, and that like very clear showing me of what happens. So to me, that is such a key piece to the teaching that we just had, of how important it is to sort of sit in that pineal, because when we slam too far into the conscious, we're not processing.
Yeah. And there is time to go there and have that kind of just emotional release and get that energy out kind of in that way. But don't stay there long. Like, I think I talked about it last time where I just had a moment where my husband's like, think about this logically. I'm like, no, 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 I just need to have a moment. Like, you need that. But if you can sit back in there and look at it from a whole different light, in effect, it
Yeah.
just changes your perspective on anything. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong, doesn't change any of that. It just means you could process it and the energy doesn't get stuck. And
Yes.
I think the interesting thing is you can feel it in your body when you're sitting in your front. It's
Yes.
like you get that straight to your gut, and you get like it's your nervous system getting that energy stuck in different spots. And you're just like, I instantly felt sick. It's like, and that's you in your conscious just going into your nervous
Yes.
system, sort of.
Humanness.
Yeah, yeah. And when you're
And
in your pioneer, you don't do that. Like you understand it, and you don't get those sort of hits of stuck energy kind of
yes,
flobbing in your body. Yeah.
which I was really having was that like sick feeling in my stomach, like I was losing my appetite. And I was just like, oh, like I just felt really horrible about it all. But I think what's really important to say is that when we move into the pineal, we're not bypassing the human experience. We're putting
No.
ourselves into a state of mind where we can process easily the emotions and everything that came up. Because when I got into that space, the emotions weren't gone, they were just able to move through me, as opposed to being clearly in that front conscious piece where they were not going anywhere.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were just
Stuck.
ruminating
Yeah.
around, making me feel sick, making me go like, this isn't my first rodeo with like, but and I don't know how many times I was like, what is going on? Like, why am I having such a hard time with this?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
feel like I should have kind of moved through this, but it just kept sitting there, which makes perfect sense being the experiencer. But
Yeah.
just so there's like a perfect example. And then they showed me other ways, and they did show me this prior, actually. They showed me before that this is what happens, but I hadn't been through an experience to be able to recognize and go, okay, let's shoot back here.
Yeah.
Right. So that
Yeah.
the energy can move through me instead of being stuck. And I know I'm repeating myself, but it was really like the new piece. It was so powerful.
Yeah.
As soon as I was able to get into that state, I was empowered in it. I felt strong. I felt justified. I felt calm.
You
And it
could
was like,
function again. You can
yes.
function again. I was watching that in when you have a disaster like our floods, and one of the ladies I know that's really like she's always in control of everything. She just froze. She just stood
Mhm.
in her flooded house, which was the water had gone down, and physically couldn't move. And you could see she was sitting in her emotional consciousness, and and the energy was so big, and the nervous system was just shutting down. It was just like
Yeah.
she couldn't even speak. She just stood there. And
Yeah.
you watch people who get to that point, and that's where you were, to the point where you pop back in. And I was at the same time going blah blah blah, and everyone's like, how can you be in so control here? How aren't you emotionally distraught by that? And I said, I am emotionally distraught by that, but I'm not stuck in that energy. I'm not
Yes.
stuck in that spot. I can recognize it, I can understand it, and I'm moving through. And there was times where I'd go home like 4 days later and just burst into tears for half an hour, because I just that energy was building up in that spot, and you just need to release it. But
Yeah.
staying there and getting stuck in there, and even worse, not doing anything about and ignoring it, you just build it up over time. And like 4 years later, you're like, why does this trigger me? You know?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's what you've been able to do. Excitingly, that's one of the biggest takeouts, is you're not getting that energy stuck there for future.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how many things do we do in our life where we start repeating these traumas and these things like this? And it's just like, well, how do you not do that? How do you not get that energy stuck from such a, like, you were sexually assaulted. It's a big deal. It's a big thing for your body to deal with, create with, go out again and have a guy next to you and feel like you're doing that. How do you not feel like that? And I bet you're so much more empowered now by sitting in your pineal to get in that situation again and not feel like that's going to
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think it's worth mentioning that on the scale of sexual assaults, this is a very small one, and I think that that's important to say because yes, it falls within the range of a sexual assault. Yes, it was violating, but I just want to honor the women
Oh,
that have
absolutely.
had
Absolutely.
so much more. And I
Yeah.
don't want to pretend that when you get stuck in that conscious that this is a very simple thing to just pop back into the pineal and process these things, but
It's
it's a
not.
really
Yeah.
small real life example of something happening, nervous system goes out, and what they said earlier, which I don't know if I shared it, was it's normal. It slams you into your conscious and it
Yeah.
slams you into your body because you have to react and you have to respond and you have to do all of those things. But when you're there, you can get stuck. So yeah, it was fascinating, Nettie. Like it was absolutely fascinating. But do you want to hear the best part?
Well, can it get any better?
Yeah. So the dude and I are now dating.
The
The
this the
the
six,
six
yeah, not the
three
liquor.
no the the 6'3", 300 pound dude and I are now dating.
Hey, listeners, we have got a lot coming to us. Tanya's back in the dating game. For those who are just joining us for the first time, you've got about 60 episodes to go back and watch because we've
Yeah.
been through a whole relationship with Tanya and this is coming up too. This is amazing. I'm so excited for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah,
And
so that
he's a
that
very
big
kind
hug you
and
had,
yes.
yeah, you were like,
Well, no, I really wasn't. But after he was like, it's like he was so he really apparently hasn't done a lot of dating or anything for like a long time. And he's like, he thinks we giggle about it because it's funny, but he was like, that's the kind of girl I want. He said, because
yeah.
not only did you go into this pub and take this guy down to the ground, but then you were like a little kitten after and just wanted to cuddle and
Ah, he saw both sides.
oh, it was
Yeah.
funny.
Oh, that's
So yeah,
awesome. I'm so excited for you. I'm so excited for all of
yeah,
us to hear the stories.
yeah.
Ah, your life is such an experience.
I know. So tell me about you.
Oh, I think we save that for the next episode.
Okay.
I had some really interesting stuff in Vietnam, partly to do with frequency. So it's interesting to do with that, but also yeah, one of them to do with our visas and a premonition that I had and went on with that. So let's do that next time.
Okay.
And we'll get onto this because I think we need time to digest this story.
But it is such a key teaching. Like it is so important to wrap your head around the actual application of this.
Yeah, and
It
I
it
think I think the number one thing take out for all of us is that if you practice being in your pineal, and as you said before, it's not that easy just to jump back into your pineal, right?
no,
Um,
no.
but I do it now because that's where I sit. Like most
Yeah.
of my life, I sit there, and it's training yourself to be in that position, and your life becomes so much more calmer. And even though the dramas happen exactly as they will be someone else, you don't react in the same way. And so when you
No, you don't.
react really in a processing way, it just changes everything. It just makes that incident not a stuck incident or not something that's gonna for a month later you're just still going like someone else who didn't go back in their pineal 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month later, they're
Oh,
still
do you
yeah,
know what they
go.
just said? They said when you process it like that, that's when it doesn't imprint on your nerve.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying about stuck. When I talk about the
Yeah,
stuck,
yeah, yeah, I know.
yeah, that's it. It's not there from your for your, genetics to go down. It's not there for that sort of stuff. That's where you can start undoing those sort of seeds that are stuck in your nervous system in different spots that you've kind of been born with or inherited with, or
Yeah,
seeded yourself when you were younger or whatever it is. I can see your patterns changing with this. Like a lot of the patterns and the person that you end up with and everything is just going to change when you hit one of these pivotal kind of points. And
yeah,
it's awesome. I came on earlier and I said to Tanya, oh, there's something different, that you are so content with who you are. And I think that is one of the things about sitting in your pineal. Like you become accepting of yourself to the point that you're not going, oh, what's that person doing? What are they doing? How, you're not so worried about everyone else. And I can really see that. Like you're shining. You're just, I mean, it might be to do with the new boyfriend, but
mm.
but you can see that energy change in someone. And when you meet someone, you often know when they're sitting in that pineal, if they're
Yeah,
just in this calmer state. So
yeah. And I think that one thing, do we have time, Nettie,
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
keep
I've got a
talking? Okay.
little bit longer.
Okay. So
Yep. I'm
one
heading
thing,
out today, so sorry I put Tanya on a time limit. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. One thing that they showed me was a couple of things. One, we got to talk about the which part of the series pissed me off.
oh yeah, okay. Do you want to do that
It was,
now or yeah, okay,
yeah,
all right.
I'll do it really quick because it was the subconscious piece. Because it irritated me because I was like, why am I like, what am I missing? Like, what am I not doing? What are you guys not showing me? Why, blah, blah, blah. And I was just frustrated because I think what was happening on sort of a soul level, it was like, duh,
Yeah,
this is how it's supposed to be done. And then there was some remembering in me that was like, duh, this is how it's supposed to be done. Right.
yeah,
But the thing that was really interesting is because part of it, I was like, how come Nettie's getting all these wonderful downloads? Because I have the same abilities that Nettie has. Why am I not? And how they explained it to me, because Nettie has a calm, gentle life. She's not a police officer going to work 10 hours a day. And, your life is a little bit calmer. And you're very good at sitting in your pineal. Pineal is where I sit when I do readings. So that's what the space that I go to when we sit down to do podcasts, which is why I get the information during the podcast and you get the information prior, is because you're sitting in your pineal. So the thing that's really cool is that I can easily go conscious, pineal, conscious, right? Back and forth. And I don't think that I really have the life where I can, and I want to give a bit of a warning because I don't want people to go into chaos and think that they can gently sit in the pineal. It doesn't, I don't know about you, Nettie, but it doesn't work like that for me. That I kind of like, if I'm picking up too much or it's getting too overwhelming, I go sort of into move my consciousness a bit forward, if that makes sense. But one other piece, I want to hear what you have to say about that. But one other piece that they showed me that was so interesting is they said when you spend more of your time in that conscious frontal part, and I keep pointing to my forehead because it's just relevant, I
yeah,
guess. When you spend more time there, in order to go through sort of the seeds and the life lessons and everything that's coming up for you, they have to put it in front of you in life in order for you to go through it because you're spending most of your time in your conscious mind. When you slip back, and it doesn't even have to be fully to the pineal where it's like, this is where I'm connecting to spirit and doing readings. It can almost be like a bit of a halfway point in between where, like you said, you're getting that bullet train of information and you're getting skills, knowledge, and abilities to work through what's happening for you, as opposed to having to have it placed in front of you again through those life lessons. Does that make sense?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And
And I do agree with you with the pineal to a certain extent, but I think you can actually sit in that pineal during crisis quite easily. And in fact, that's probably where I go into that space and do so well in crisis. And I think you do. I think you absolutely do, because you wouldn't have done what you did in the pub if you weren't sitting in that space. You, it's that ability where you're just on the edge of consciousness, where you're in control of your physical, but also your reactions and your subconscious were just like instant. It's just you almost like knew what to do in those moments. I think there's a balance between it. But I think sitting in our conscious is so important. We wouldn't have a conscious mind and a conscious body if we
Yes.
weren't meant to sit in it. And, I think I definitely find that the ability to pop back and into that, almost on the scale of the pile, and if you've got your conscious and your subconscious, as you just said before, it's what level are you going into? And I find when we're together, when the frequency changes, and that's where it's more than just the pineal. When the frequency levels change, when the wavelengths change, which is what happens when we get together, is why my vacuum blows up and why our screen stops and all these things happen, because our energy raises the vibrations. And so there's more than just being in your pineal that gets you to be able to sort of do your mediumship and all those sorts of stuff, as you know. And so from a listener's point of view, it's because you pop in your pineal doesn't mean you're going to get Tanya's abilities. It just doesn't. But if you can raise your frequencies and lower your frequencies and actually do that, and like music and meditation, and that's why people actually do that. And next week when we talk about what happened to me in Vietnam with the frequency, it's a really good example of how it didn't matter whether I was in my pineal or not, how this can actually happen when frequencies change. So I think pineal's a great space to sit. Don't forget your conscious being in it, but being in your pineal doesn't mean you're not in your conscious. You are in your conscious as well. You're accessing your conscious, but you've just got more access to your subconscious, and you're sitting in a less emotional
Yeah, yeah.
state.
And you know what? I appreciate you making that clarification, because it's sort of the way that they show it to me is that right here is the space where I connect fully to spirit, like
Yeah,
where I'm an open channel and I can do readings. Over here, it like right at the front of my head in the conscious is where I was sort of trying to process this. But I think that there's also a whole spectrum in
yeah,
here, so it wouldn't be fair to say you need to sit in this spot. You need,
yeah.
because depending on what you're doing, once you kind of become conscious and aware of being able to do this, you'll shift back and forth,
Absolutely.
right?
It's a fluid thing.
Yeah,
Imagine if you were going to like a police job, especially when you were in what you previously did,
child
and you were sitting
exploitation.
up here, right? In
Of
this,
course I was. There was no way I was back here. I
yeah.
didn't want to pick up on anything.
But also you're not sitting in that emotional spot either. Like you were probably sitting just at the edge of your conscious and your subconscious, where you're not actually trying to bring in their emotions. And it's not like a door open, a door shut. It's like, okay, you're able to guard your own emotions from what there is. But if you were sitting
Yeah,
in your emotional state, just your conscious emotional state, and you saw some of the things that you saw, you would have just been a mess.
yeah,
But I think as a policewoman, that's what you're able to do. You're able to sit back in. It's just a slightly different spot than it is when you're
yeah.
open to trying to feel people's emotions and all that sort of stuff. And I think if if it was as simple as that, we'd all be
We'd all
just
be doing
doing
it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it
And
is
we
quite
wouldn't have to
complex.
do a whole teaching on it.
Yeah, it is complex, and it is being able to open some of it and not others. And it's why people can see things rather than hear things and fear things, and because they're opening different sort of channels and different doors. So it's as much as we do a lovely little diagram of conscious, subconscious, and the pineal, it is just so much more complex than that. Yeah,
It's extremely complex. And
yeah,
there is so much information that's going to be coming in the next number of podcasts where we're unpacking it, we're explaining it, we're giving examples. Please follow along, because this is not simple. I mean, it's simple, but it's complex and it's really interesting, and it's a whole different way of sort of looking at how where we sit sort of consciously in, not consciously, what would the word be for where we sit? It's kind of like in our consciousness, yeah.
Yeah. Our
or like a
awareness,
state.
our state. Yeah.
A state. So what sort of
Yeah.
state we sit in, because I know that there's the I'm connecting to spirit state and the I'm not connecting to spirit state. And then there's a whole plethora in the middle. And I'm really excited to go through this with everybody because this was life changing
Yeah.
for me to understand this, life changing. Because for me to walk through that situation and all of a sudden go, and and it just moved right through me
Yeah.
was
If you haven't watched the
amazing.
5 pieces, so if anyone's listening that hasn't watched the 5 videos, watch them, listen to them, because even if you pop them on in the background and listen to them a few times, because they do need to be absorbed. But listening to these 5 will actually make a difference to your life. Like it will actually
It,
change.
I am here to tell you, it will make a difference to your life. Not only that, the amount of things that are all of a sudden like popping into my life,
Yeah.
like opportunity, like all these different things that are flowing really nicely. It's fascinating. And I'm so excited to go on this journey with everybody.
Yeah.
Like, follow, subscribe. I am so excited to go through this journey with every single one of you. And Nettie, I have missed you so much. I am so happy to be back with you.
I've missed you too. See you, everyone.